Now, unlike Mr. Poilievre, I've actually worked in the private sector. I know how the world works.
Good morning. Welcome back to Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. I'm coming at you live from our nation's capital in Ottawa on this Sunday morning. What is it, the 6th of April? Oh, God, we're going through April fast. We're 3 weeks away from a federal election that was called 2 weeks ago today. When I come back, my analysis of that and some other observations over the weekend. We'll be right back with more.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Please like the station now. We're continuing to battle of suppression. Maybe I'll just stop talking about it. Whatever will be with this. And thank you for your support. We're heading towards 50,000 subscribers. I can do it in the next couple of weeks, and it will make a difference. It will be a tipping point. I know that with this station, and we will beat the suppression we've been under. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for sharing this broadcast with your friends and family. I'm going to continue to reach out in the next week to other broadcasters, as I've done, and I'll tell you why. Because we need to cross-pollinate. It's an expression we used to use in communications, in which I worked for many years, and I think we need to do that in YouTube, in Rumble, and social media. Especially because it's so suppressed by a lot of people with woke ideology. And if you talk about the things we're talking about on this station, some people think that's far right. Some people think that's unacceptable. So we need to talk to each other, and we need to expand and broaden our audience. Here we are, it's Sunday. By the way, I'm doing this early because I'm trying to get to church for 10:30. That's why I'm doing it there. It's just so you know, because I know I like to stick to a consistent time, but it's very difficult to get to church for 10:30 if I'm doing the broadcast at 10. So I appreciate your flexibility this morning. I hope you're having a great weekend. The weather has been a little uneven here in the Ottawa area. We survived the ice storm. No power outages here, but a lot of folks across Ontario had them. But we're doing okay. And so we're 3 weeks away from this election. And what is my analysis? Pierre Poilievre can win this election. Or let's put it this way. Mark Carney can lose this election. What we need to do, though, is continue to hammer home why Mark Carney is an unacceptable prime minister. Why he's beholden to China, or how he's beholden to China and the globalists, and what the agenda here is. And I invite you to have a look at my Substack. I've got so many irons in the fire right now. I'm writing for Substack, and I encourage you to go to my Substack. I'm writing 2 to 3 articles a week now on Substack. I know I used to just sort of recycle material. I'm writing a lot more original content on my Substack. Encourage you to look at that. I don't advertise myself very much, and because I'm reluctant to do that. I always have been. It's just the way I am. But I'm proud of the work we're doing on Substack. It's growing, doing a lot of original journalism, and I'm doing a lot of material on Mark Carney. Read the latest. It's all about how Mark Carney got caught in this Chinese web of deception over Paul Chiang, the member of parliament from the Markham area, who actually, you all know this, but it's still mind-boggling, who actually encouraged people in an audience he was speaking to in January to go out and abduct his conservative opponent, then conservative opponent, Joe Tay, Bring them to the Chinese consulate and claim the $1 million Hong Kong dollar reward. Yeah, it's 183,000 Canadian dollars. But it was shocking. So you can read more about this here. Now, tomorrow we're doing a fairly extensive expose into Mark Carney's money solution. What he wants to do to the Canadian dollar. Excuse me. What does he want to do to the Canadian dollar? Well, I think he wants to create a digital currency, and he wants to ensure that you can't spend your money without the government knowing where you're spending it. That's where we're going with it. Now, there's nothing inevitable about a Mark Carney victory in this election. A lot of people are saying, Mark Carney can't lose. If Mark Carney does not participate in the French language debate, and he's already said he won't, and I don't think he will because his French is inferior to everyone else's on that stage, I think he could actually try to back out of the English language debate, which would be catastrophic for the Mark Carney campaign. Because a lot of people are undecided until they see the debate. As bad as the debates are in Canada, because they represent an argument at the kitchen table, where you've got all of these people on the stage bickering with each other at the end. But a lot of Canadians wait for that debate. And in the past, of course, we've had 2 or 3 of them. But they wait for that debate to make their decision about whom they're going to be voting. And I think this could be Pierre Poilievre's shining hour, because he's a far superior debater than Mark Carney. Mark Carney is pretty smooth, and he's very good at looking boring, but he's not a good debater. So I think this could be a tipping point. I think we've also had a tipping point in this campaign in other ways. I kept talking last week about the need for Pierre Poilievre to stop talking about Donald Trump and to start talking about change. Let's go back to, I'm trying to remember, 2008, the 2008 Obama campaign in the United States. Now, I'm no fan of Barack Obama. I think he failed miserably in domestic policy and failed miserably on foreign policy. And he really had nothing going for him except the idea that he was historic. What was his campaign slogan in 2008? Think back. And I thought it was ludicrous at the time. I have to tell you this. I thought it was stupid. I said, people can't be that stupid. It was one word: change. That was it. That was his campaign slogan, and it was on decorating all kinds of signs, hats, even dresses. Change. But yes, it worked, because they'd had 8 years of George W. Bush, and George W. Bush did not go out with any fanfare, if you recall. But Barack Obama's slogan of change worked. Now, am I saying Canadians are that stupid? Well, some of them are, because they're actually thinking Mark Carney represents change. Pierre Poilievre has got to hammer it home every day that Mark Carney's not change. Mark Carney's status quo. Mark Carney is continuation of the Liberal Party policies of Justin Trudeau. Mark Carney is globalism. Mark Carney is in China's pocket. Mark Carney represents the worst of Canadian politics. Let's just listen to, before I get to Poilievre, let's listen to what Mark Carney likes to talk
around the new industries,
Yes.
particularly around China's leadership in climate change and the
Right.
further acceleration that's necessary for that. That's a crucial discussion, as is the discussion around AI and really the application of AI. We see China's leadership there in deployment of AI technologies, which is in many respects unique, and we can all learn from that and work together.
Okay, what's the takeaway here? China is a leader in climate change? What universe does this man live in? China, nobody has more coal-fired plants than China. China doesn't give a damn about climate change legislation. China gives a damn about China. It's China first. And that should be Mark Carney's slogan. And his podium should say China first, because that's who Mark Carney's been working for. Globalism and China. He really is a huge fan of China. And to suggest that China is leading in climate change, he's either deluded or he's lying, perhaps both. But of course, it's not true. But Mark Carney doesn't care if he's telling the truth, because what I discovered in this campaign is that Justin Trudeau was a fair actor at times, but he was always a little too melodramatic, wasn't he? Always too just over the top. Whereas Mark Carney, I think, is a better actor. He's convincing. He's convinced a lot of Canadians that he represents change, that he's a moderate guy who's going to change his policy direction. It's not going to be so extreme. So you move Stephen Guilbeault out of environment and climate change, and you make him your Quebec lieutenant, and you put him in charge of parks. He'll be safe there. You start talking about, well, I'm a little flexible on pipelines, at least when you're in Alberta. But when you go back to Ontario, you're not very flexible. Mark Carney is talking out of both sides of his mouth. He's lying to Canadians. He's pretending to be something he isn't. He's a net zero champion. He is a huge environmental extremist. And that's what Mark Carney is all about. Let's listen to a little more of Mark Carney.
In response to the crisis, we built up a network of swap agreements amongst the major advanced economy central banks in order to provide that. And recently, we've recognized that that network of swap agreements shouldn't necessarily be limited to the G7 economies. In June, under my predecessor, the Bank of England signed such an agreement with the People's Bank of China. And this reflects the growing international role of the Renminbi. It dovetails with the possibility of establishing a Renminbi clearing bank here in London, and it's also consistent with our broader policy of openness to hosting foreign wholesale banking activities, which could include could be extended to branches of Chinese banks. Now, helping internationalization of the Chinese currency is a global good, consistent with London's historic role.
Yeah, and as I have said repeatedly, what is the renminbi? Well, that's the Chinese yuan. I think he talks about it that way because nobody knows what the renminbi is, but it's the Chinese yuan. It's the digital version of the Chinese yuan, which is the Chinese dollar, the currency. He wants the Chinese currency to replace the US dollar. Does Donald Trump know this? Donald Trump has endorsed Mark Carney twice now. Donald Trump obviously has a secret deal with Mark Carney because he did not impose the latest round of tariffs on Canada. Mark Carney's still talking like a tough guy with Donald Trump. So what has he got on Donald Trump? Why is there this cozy arrangement between the two of them? I think Pierre Poilievre talks about why Donald Trump likes Mark Carney so much in this next series of clips. But I can tell you why Donald Trump likes Mark Carney, because they both think they can control each other. They both have the goods on each other to some degree. There's a relationship there that goes back many, many years. And Donald Trump thinks Mark Carney is in his pocket. And I think Mark Carney falsely believes that he's got Donald Trump in his pocket. And that, of course, is not the case. That's not the case. And Mark Carney is going to be very surprised when Donald Trump bites back. But do you think for a minute, and I said this the other day, for those of you who see me on Redacted every week, and I'll be on again next week talking about the campaign, do you think for a minute Mark Carney's going to stem the flow of fentanyl into Canada? It's all coming through the BC ports. My friend and colleague Sam Cooper at the Bureau has done some incredible investigative reporting on this. I've had him on the show twice to talk about this. The fentanyl is coming in at the Vancouver ports. People are just ignoring it. It's being processed, and it's going south of the border. Do you think Mark Carney is going to tell China, stop sending fentanyl to Canada when he is so beholden to China, where he goes to Beijing and gets a $276 million loan from China? He lobbies the mayor of Beijing. Do you think Mark Carney is going to tell China, sorry, keep your fentanyl at home? I don't think so. And yet Donald Trump said that was one of the chief reasons he was imposing tariffs on Canada, was border security and fentanyl. Mark Carney will not improve the fentanyl situation for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump needs to realize that. Let's listen to Pierre Poilievre at a Penticton rally. And I love Penticton. It's in the Okanagan Valley, British Columbia, my home province. Someday I might go back to. if the political scene ever becomes a little more sane and I can afford it. But I've been to Penticton many times. Pierre Poilievre was there yesterday, had a great rally. And, I'm not here just to be a cheerleader for Pierre Poilievre, but I don't know who else is going to win this election instead of Mark Carney. Let's listen to this.
That a conservative government will cut red tape by 25% over the next 2 years. We'll impose a 2-for-1 rule, which means every new regulation or rule will have to be matched with eliminating 2 existing ones. And we will do the same with dollar value. Every $1 increase in the administrative burden of the federal government will have to be matched with $2 of reductions elsewhere. And finally, to make sure there are no more tricks like the Liberals have played to get around this rule, we'll give a legal mandate to the Auditor General to audit every year the administrative burden to ensure that these rules are being honored. This will force the senior bureaucracy to constantly comb through the rules, get rid of unnecessary and useless regulations, and find the most efficient way to protect public safety and the environment. There are expensive and bureaucratic ways that involve lots of paper, and there are ways that you can do more efficiently. And I'll give you an example. When they had the Great Global Recession, the Harper government made the decision that we would fund municipal projects using a one-page application form, 1 page. And there would be 1 environmental review per project, not 7 or 8. Now everyone screamed and said, well, this is going to harm safety and the environment. Well, we completed 23,500 projects in 2 years without 1 public safety problem or 1 environmental problem identified by the Environment Commissioner. Mark Carney and his team of Trudeau Liberals want you to forget. They want you to forget the 10 years of growing bureaucracy and shrinking wages, the anti-development and anti-growth policies. They want you to think that somehow they will be different than they were in the last 3 terms. Now, I can't help but notice that Mr. Carney is contradicting himself again today as he plagiarizes my latest policy.
We know Mark Carney plagiarized his PhD thesis at Oxford, or at least we have sufficient evidence to indicate that. Mark Carney likes to plagiarize, apparently. But he likes to copy everything Poilievre does. It's quite amazing. A couple of days later, there's Mark Carney echoing what Pierre Poilievre has said. He's stealing every policy directive because, believe it or not, the Liberal Party did not sit down and actually write out a policy platform for this election. No, I know this. They had no policy platform. The strategy was run against Donald Trump, be prime ministerial, and copy the conservative policies that you think are most popular and pretend they're your own. That is what's happening here.
On April the 1st, just 4 or 5 days ago, his government got rid of the apprenticeship grant. And today, after seeing that I support the grant and I'll bring it back, he's trying to plagiarize me yet again. You can't believe anything he says when he does one thing on April Fool's Day and then Not even a week later, he says the opposite. He is just like Justin Trudeau, and there will be no change if you give Liberals a fourth term. I have announced a real plan for our apprentices. We will train up 350,000 of them. We'll bring back the apprenticeship grant Conservatives originally introduced and that Liberals have eliminated. And we will stand up for workers across this country. The most powerful thing that we can do to break free from dependence on the Americans is to unleash the power of our resources, entrepreneurs, and workers. That starts by repealing the anti-development, anti-pipeline law C-69, a law that Mark Carney announced the other day he will keep in place. It's time for a new Conservative government that will put this country first and restore the Canadian promise that anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, that hard work gets you a great life in a safe and affordable home on a beautiful Canadian street under our wonderful Canadian flag. Canada first. For a change. Let's bring it home.
It gets a little sloganeering towards the end, but Pierre Poilievre needs to point out that Mark Carney's not changed, he's changed. And he got it right there. He needs to get that right every day because he has been hamstrung and tripped up by his communications department, by the people running this campaign. They've been giving him horrible advice. I'll say it again, horrible advice. When Pierre Poilievre is set free, when he's let loose to actually talk the way he does, you have to remember, Pierre Poilievre started out in politics in a communications capacity. He actually did communications when Ezra Levant, my friend Ezra Levant, the guy who runs Rebel News and runs it very well, was running in Calgary, southwest, at the constituency there. Pierre Poilievre started out working for Ezra Levant as a communications guy. Pierre Poilievre understands communications better than the people who are running his campaign because they don't get it. They think just attack Donald Trump and that's going to be a winning formula. And get rid of all of these people who are putting anything on the internet that is in any way contrary to the liberal narrative. Poilievre, in this next clip, defends one of those candidates because they've already gotten rid of too many candidates for bad reasons. I mean, and I'm talking specifically of Stéphane Marquis from Montreal, who will be on this show next week to discuss what happened to him because he dared to go on the internet and discuss the World Economic Forum. He dared to suggest the invasion of Ukraine had something to do with the expansion of NATO over the past 20 years. He dared to suggest that Bill Gates is making a fortune from the COVID vaccine. These are all facts. But here Poilievre is standing up for Aaron Gunn. And Aaron Gunn is in the crossfire for apparently questioning elements of residential schools. But Aaron Gunn is bending over backwards now, trying to appease the liberal mob, the woke mob. And at least Poilievre is not prepared to cut him loose.
I want to ask you about Aaron Gunn, one of your candidates here. There's been a letter sent to the party, and I'll read it in part to you, denying the impacts of residential school, accusing Gunn of denying the impacts of residential schools and the generational trauma and genocide experienced by First Nations people. There are other concerns raised about his candidacy. Local mayors have said that they don't support him and don't think he should be a Conservative candidate. Do you still stand by Aaron Gunn as your candidate on the North Island?
Yes, I do, and the letter is false. He has not denied the impact of residential schools. That's just misinformation. In fact, he has said that he wants to continue to condemn the residential schools and build stronger partnerships with First Nations people to unlock our resources so that we can produce incredible paychecks and opportunities for First Nations communities right across British Columbia, bring home production of natural gas and other major resource projects. In fact, bring in a First Nations resource charge that allows companies to pay those taxes directly to these communities so that they can have incredible prosperity. We're the only ones offering that bright future, and the choice in the election will be whether, after the lost Liberal decade of costs and crime up and our economy down under the American thumb, with our First Nations people denied the opportunities they deserve, we want to elect them to a fourth term, or whether it's time to put our country and all of its people first, with a new Conservative government that will unleash opportunity for our economy and especially ensure that First Nations communities are the primary beneficiaries of that great Canadian goal. Thank you.
Okay, the last part of this answer was pretty bad because he's really forgetting his own talking points here. But he defended Aaron Gunn, which is good, but you have to remember, you can't say anything on the internet about any of this phenomena surrounding residential schools. And what do I mean by that? I mean, these graveyards that supposedly existed, none of them have actually been confirmed. We know that. You can't talk about Canadian churches being set afire. That's off limits. Why is that? Why is that? And we need to fight the censorship. We need to fight back on free speech on this and stop apologizing because somebody questioned anything. We have a right to question. We have a right to say, I don't know if that's true. That's called free speech and freedom of thought. I still have that in Canada. And I want Pierre Poilievre to enunciate that very carefully and articulately.
Thank you. We'll now go to the next question.
Brendan Phillips, Black Press Media. As we stand here in a border community, one that relies heavily on tourism and cross-border commerce, which is being strangled by the United States, there are some voters who are concerned that the party and campaign are too reminiscent of the current American government. America first, Canada first, calls to cut public broadcasters with NPR, PBS versus CBC.
Okay, hold everything. What in the hell is he talking about? This is one of the stupidest questions I've heard from a journalist in what, days? No, weeks. Why is it wrong for Donald Trump to be criticizing NPR, National Public Radio, and that somehow makes it wrong for Pierre Poilievre to follow through on his promise to privatize and defund the CBC? Both of these organizations don't deserve it of taxpayer money, $1 taxpayer money. So if Pierre Poilievre is aligning himself, or if the Conservative Party is aligned with anything Donald Trump has proposed, does that mean he's in Donald Trump's pocket? No, it just means they agree on some policy issues. So what a stupid question. Of course, Pierre Poilievre is continuing to advocate for the defunding of the CBC. It's one of his most popular and rational policies.
Eliminations of government regulations in sweeping manner.
And once again, Donald Trump inaugurated the Department of Government Efficiency. One of the most popular moves he made, slashing unnecessary, wasteful government spending. Pierre Poilievre has gone nowhere near that kind of pledge or promise. He's talked about cutting regulations. He's talked about cutting government waste. Is that wrong because Donald Trump has said that too? This reporter clearly has a political agenda.
Even Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has said that the Conservative Party leadership is in sync in direction with Trump and America. How do you address the concerns of being too closely aligned to a foreign government that is threatening Canada and is destroying its own country right now?
He's not aligned with a foreign government. He's aligned with a couple of policy positions from Donald Trump and the Republican Party. This is idiot not understand this.
Well, your question is false. Mr. Trump has endorsed the Liberals. He said it will be easier for him if the Liberals stay.
And very classy response, by the way, because I was waiting for Poilievre to just castigate this journalist. But he's very polite, and he's very measured, and he's very moderate in his response. And I think it's actually more effective for being so?
In power. He said it multiple times. He said that he doesn't agree with me, he doesn't support me, and he doesn't want me to be Prime Minister of Canada. I think a lot of people have to ask themselves, why does Donald Trump want the Liberals in power for a fourth term? The answer is clear. He wants Canada to be weak. And after the lost Liberal decade, with costs and crime up and our economy down under America's thumb, we are more vulnerable and dependent than ever before. And that's why we can't give them a fourth term. What we need is a government that's going to put Canada first for a change by axing taxes, unleashing our resources.
There it is, folks. Put Canada first for a change. That's the Conservative slogan. That's what they need to repeat day in, day out, day in, day out against Mark Carney. Stop going on about Donald Trump. I think Poilievre handled this very well. He got to make Canada first for a change.
To bring home the $500 billion the Americans have stolen from us under the last years of the Liberals. It's time for a strong Canadian leader. A strong Conservative rather than a weak Liberal is exactly what this country needs, even if Donald Trump doesn't like it.
Brilliant response. I'll be back in a few moments, make sure I got the right one, with some concluding remarks. Yes, please visit our store. I think we've got some of the best merchandise, the best gear there that you can find on these podcasts. I love it. Have a look at it. Buy something. See a picture of you with that gear, with that kit. And I'll post it on the next episode of Stand on Guard. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. Have a blessed Sunday. Go to church, go to synagogue, go to tabernacle, go worship. It's Sunday. God bless you. Godspeed. And I'm David Krayden, and I'll be back again tomorrow. Bye for now.